3 minutes and 3 seconds.
Yeah, we serve on more than one committee. And
We're glad
some of
we're
the
here.
committees are productive and have lots going on. It's not one issue that we should.
Senator Ash, welcome to the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee. I'm not sure.
Great to be here. Never set foot in this room.
So this is a conference committee on S.230, an act relating to renewable energy siting. Aaron has copies of a draft conference committee report, and I'd like to get those distributed to the members of the conference committee and to people who would like a copy. More copies are being made.
The windows open in here?
You have to throw rocks through them.
We have split windows, yes.
Really?
I'm sure they do that. Now it's open.
All that time.
You can't see.
I've tried to do things differently sometimes.
Less than a minute, and we're gonna figure it out.
Hold on, my purse is there.
Do people want a minute before they start taking notes? There are copies coming around.
Can you point us to the equipment?
All that time, Tony. Breathe.
We're only talking about, what, the changes?
We're only talking about the changes. I know there's more copies being
Describe the
made.
document.
Please. Okay.
Where the changes are. So, Aaron Adler, Legislative Council, you have a recorded committee of conference draft 1.1. This document takes the House proposal of amendment and makes all the changes in the Senate concurrence with further proposal of amendment, and then there are a few additional changes that are bolded, and those are the ones that are, I think, those are the ones that are likely to be focused on. There are some that were suggested by the House that are, I believe, non-substantive, so why don't we deal with those first?
Great.
Page 16, page 16, in the training section, the introductory language, section 10, is rephrased to say the department shall collaborate with the LCT and VAPTA rather than ordering entities outside the legislature to collaborate. And outside the state, rather, excuse me. Then in...
State government.
State government. Yes, I got it wrong twice. Thank you, Representative. Then
Garage.
well, it's easy when only one person's talking, because then we can all hear.
Yes.
So, can I say we accept this?
Well, I
So
wouldn't
we'll never
give
come
on,
back
I
to
wouldn't
it?
give on it yet.
It was our idea. It was originally our idea, it just couldn't get in time. Let's
Thank you
cave.
for that
Let's-
Good idea.
Senator Ross.
Let's cave.
But let's mark that as one that we gave.
We're givers.
Yeah.
Yes, we're givers.
This is starting out well.
Building
Great, then on page 29, there is bolded language at the bottom. We're in the pilot project for preferred locations within the standard offer.
What happened in 27?
We're going
Oh,
through the
you're
technical.
Sorry, gotcha.
27 is the wind issue.
Gotcha. That's technical.
And other things as well. So this language as it came over from the Senate was reduced from a 3-year to 1-year pilot, but there still was language in the sentence that said, if in a given year an allocation under this project is not fully subscribed, and the House pointed out that it's only 1 year, so let's revise this language so that it's 1 year. If an allocation is not fully subscribed, the board.
What do you think?
I think we can give you that. We're giving a lot
All
here.
right.
Like a river.
It is. We're so generous.
Then on page 33, this is the language on what happened in the parking lot thing. Also, the same changes made to remove language that said if in a given year. So it's bolded because it's a change, but actually the only change is that on the third line, it used to say if in a given year the board receives, and now it says if the board receives. Because we're only talking 1 year pilot. So those are the only changes on the pilot project. Let's think clearly about this one.
We'll give you that.
There is also another change from the Senate proposal of amendment that is not shown because it's removed from the bill, and that is the bill back language that is now in the appropriations bill.
Okay.
Well, at least it's my understanding, it's all going in the appropriations bill according to this. So that's not in here.
Are we good on the technical?
So then you go to section 12, it starts on page 26, but this is the sound standards. And the subsection A of section 12 is the same as the Senate proposed it. Subsection B is different from what passed the Senate. It would direct the board to adopt temporary rules using the same process that is used for emergency rules on sound levels from wind generation facilities. The rules would be effective on adoption. They'd apply to applications for these facilities filed on or after the effective date of this section, which this bill makes effective on passage. Until the board adopts those temporary rules, the board would not issue a CPG for a wind generation facility for which an application is filed on or after the effective date of this section. Then in subdivision 1, rules issued pursuant to this subsection B shall be deemed to meet the standard under 3 VSA 844A. This is so the rules don't actually have to demonstrate that there is an imminent peril. They're just deemed to meet the standard. This is commonly done. The General Assembly's done this often when it wants to get rules done quickly, is use the emergency rulemaking process and just deem the standard to be met. Then on page 28, it directs that the rules state standards that would apply to all wind generation facilities, or a methodology for determining that on a case-by-case basis, or a combination. This is actually the same language that is given them as direction for the permanent rules. And finally, subdivision 3, it notwithstands 3 VSA section 844B, under which emergency rules would be effective only for 120 days, and instead these rules would remain in effect until the earlier of the effective date of the permanent rules, or the date by which they're supposed to adopt those permanent rules, as it may be extended by LCAR, which you've already allowed under subsection A. So basically the idea is that these temporary rules would be in place until the board adopts permanent rules, and they would go away.
Senator Ash.
Since this is the first time seeing the actual language here, can you explain how this differs from what the House and Senate had done in terms of this period from the day we leave to the day the new rules are adopted?
If there are any applications filed during the period from the day you leave to the date of signature, those applications will be subject to the status quo. Once it's signed, then applications on and after the date of signature will be subject to these temporary rules.
So currently, as I understand it, CPGs have thus far been issued case by case, right? So, and now we're going to have an articulated standard in the form of a rule. Is that the correct way to look at it? It won't apply to a particular case, it'll be a general rule.
It'll be a general rule that's then applied in particular cases. So the rule might have one standard that fits all. It could have multiple standards for multiple categories. It could have one standard for some categories and then leave others for case by case, but state a methodology for how that's going to be done. So it might be, okay, this is how we figure out how to do sound levels in each case. So that's been implicit in all versions of this since it was first proposed by the House.
Senator Ash.
I'll hold off.
Senator Rogers.
Well, my concern would be there is no floor, there's no minimum standard, and there's nothing stopping the interim rules from being exactly the status quo, which we know in the current projects has created sound issues with neighbors.
This leaves open that door that, that both the House and Senate intent will not be met, achieved,
Right.
if we don't clarify the rulemaking.
What clarification would you do?
My preference would be going with some standard. I think we at one point sent you over the New Hampshire standard, but I don't think you liked that standard for whatever reason. But there needs to be some floor that is better than the current standard, which has been causing problems with neighbors, which is the 45 averaged over an hour.
I don't think we sent over the New Hampshire standard, that's not an
I thought we,
version of
I
the
thought,
bill.
no, we sell a copy of it. I thought somebody sent you guys the, and so the New Hampshire standard, I think, is 45 in daytime and 40 at night. I can't remember, maybe, it's not averaged over an hour, but I can't, it's a lower sound standard
Representative
an
Clemens.
hour.
So I would respond by saying, you know, I think it's a little unfair to predict exactly what the Public Service Board would do. I mean, that's certainly within the realm of possibility. But there's a ton of other possibilities that they could do also. And at a certain point, like it or not, we have to delegate that responsibility. And that's what we're doing. We can't, I don't know of anything that we do with anything where we cover all the bases of what if to the what if going forward. So.
Well, I guess I would just say that I think we do in other legislation put parameters around stuff. I think the big difference here is this is dramatically different than what we passed through the Senate and what you passed through the House, where through their rulemaking, it was a long enough period of time, they were going to take all the things they do in rulemaking, including the public testimony, but we were also going to go through another session next year where we had an opportunity to have the board in to update legislators with where they were at, and we'd have at least a look back on it. And I'm just raising the flag that with the interim rules, we don't give them any parameters to operate in.
Senator Ash.
I'm just wondering if the House objects to forestalling the possibility of rules that would be the status quo. I understand that if you're asking for rulemaking, that's delegating the responsibility, but I'm thinking of general permits, for instance, which are issued across like a whole class of activities meant to meet a minimum standard, and then if there's some extraordinary case, there have to be extra conditions that are offered. So I would say that I don't find myself, I'm not someone who wants to dismantle the PSB or DPS structures. I have had my critiques, but also think they generally do good work. On the other hand, if what the House and Senate both were attempting to achieve is making sure that from here on out, a certain heightened sensitivity, if you will, or rules that establish a different floor for mitigating some of these concerns, while giving the flexibility about how to achieve that, what would the House oppose preventing the status quo from persisting?
If we can have that discussion in the next 15 minutes, I think we would not be opposed to considering an alternative.
I think one of the challenges is that we know it's a complicated situation. There's a lot of acoustical engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So this interim rule is going to be written, and then there's going to be the permanent rulemaking going on. The very same people who are going to write the permanent rule are also the same folks writing the interim rule. So I understand the whole thing where people are a little nervous, oh, well, what will it be? What's hard for me to imagine, given all the conversation that's happened to date, that anything that's any less stringent than the status quo is even remotely possible, and that I'm actually comfortable that they'll be working to develop the most best rule they can in the interim rule and then in the final rule. It's just it's very hard to imagine that we can pre-decide the case and start blocking it, building in provisions. I don't know what provisions we could add. I mean, it's a sincere question. I don't know what provisions we could add that would legitimately then ask them to do their best ruling without sort of prejudging their answers.
Well, I think we have a few minutes to see if we can figure out what else they could add. I don't know if Steve or Ash, you have a
Well,
thought?
I'm trying to understand how we would foreclose the opportunity to maintain
The status quo.
the status quo. I know that that is unlikely, because I think as Senator Bray just mentioned, the board and departments do not work outside of the context that we're all in. But that's why I'm not sure why there's, in general, not in this room, but just in general, there's resistance to making sure that doesn't happen, that opportunity is removed. And that's something I can't say I imagine we can draft
Well,
looking at the language for the first
yeah.
time, but
So the major difference, stop me if I'm wrong, would be that they would set the emergency rules or standards without having an open docket, without hearing from folks first. And so if there was a way to get buy-in for what they come up with as emergency rules, I don't know if that's enforceable or temporary standards.
So the statute that's referenced is the process for emergency rules, and that directs the issuer to have such public notice and process as is practicable. So they actually, they have 30 days, they could have a public process. It's actually, the way it's worded, it's within their discretion to do so, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood what the statutory references mean.
Could we word it so it's less
Not just
discretionary?
permissive, but
Yeah.
just required.
Brief public process before they,
You could probably, after,
I'm just thinking out loud about ways to.
you'd have to
Depend on the
extend
status
the
quo.
amount of time that there were no applications accepted, I would think,
if you have them do this.
to buy the time.
45 days.
You know what I mean, to buy the time for that.
You would.
I'm just playing it out. If you add a public process to an emergency rulemaking process, I would think that until that emergency rule's in place, you've made it a little harder probably to do the emergency rules in that period of time in order to hear from the public and possibly respond. But
It depends on what kind of process you want them to have.
Right,
They could have
correct.
one workshop where people can come and tell them what they want, and then they go off and do a rule, an interim rule, and then they have a much more major process for the permanent ones. But yes, you could do it within 30 days. It would require some hard work.
Senator Gray.
Well, I was just gonna offer, if we want to allow for that public process, not, maybe adding 15 days to this interim period is an acceptable thing, I don't know. If it allowed for a little more time for their process to unfold. I'm being for that, so I'll put that on the table. I was thinking about floor language. I talked to Senator Rogers before we came over. And it's, one possibility is just saying that, that the rule shall propose standards no less stringent than any existing CPG, that kind of thing. I don't know if you could say, we've looked at all these, we know we are going to be at least as good. I don't know how much more you can, then anything beyond that, I think the challenge is to say you're prejudging an outcome. But you could build a floor in. We talked about that a little bit. It's a minor comfort, but it's, at least you would establish that you would use a standard no less stringent than any current CPG issued.
Is that something that's
I'm
definable?
saying it out
We'd
loud
have
now.
to work with Aaron.
Senator Rogers.
And I know that at one point, working with Aaron, I did see New Hampshire standards, which do and I don't know, maybe nobody else likes the New Hampshire standards, but it is a higher standard, and it would give me comfort to have a floor of a New Hampshire standard until they come up with the rules, but I don't know if anybody else would be interested in looking at that or is familiar with the New Hampshire standard.
Do we have an idea what they are?
It doesn't matter.
They are not.
I won't get signed. I don't,
Yeah,
I can answer Representative Hill's question.
you know,
that's going in.
the clock is ticking.
Prejudging the outcome and
The clock is ticking, but it's
putting the
not,
whole standard in.
hasn't been contributed, the sand in the hourglass, everybody has their own contribution to how many grains have fallen. And so, we thought we were pretty cool a couple days ago. I think it's always important to not fall prey to artificial deadlines. Make sure we're making the right decision, and that whatever language we agree to is right. I've been burnt, Act 46, I can name 10 other bills that I've walked out of here. People rushed and made bad decisions. I just want to make sure we don't do that here.
Well, I don't wanna speak for the group. We discussed that with stakeholders, the New Hampshire standards. We haven't taken any testimony on it. I don't know if we have time to feel comfortable with knowing enough about the New Hampshire standards to include them in the bill. But we're still open to talking about some kind of floor,
So, correct me, Aaron, we are talking about a period of time until they issue the emergency, as a result of the emergency rulemaking, what the standard, is that what we're talking about? Or are we talking about what they would be permissible to issue as the emergency rule?
That's right.
So can I offer some language?
Sure.
So the phrase I'm thinking of is something along the lines of conditions with standards no less stringent than any existing CPG. It's like floor language. And then the other thing I've heard us talk about is
Just-
timing in public comment, and then, you know, maybe to add 15 days to the timing of the interim rule cycle.
and require public process.
And to require the public process.
Can we get Aaron's take on the CPG standard language?
Well, less stringent is presumably meaning more protective in some way. But do you mean that, you know, don't allow sound levels that are louder than allowed by an existing CPG? Is that, I'm not,
What do I mean by no less stringent?
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like there would be the quiet, whatever, if you look at the totality of CPGs out there, that you would do nothing noisier than anything you already have. Say it the other way around.
So right now it's 45, so you couldn't make it 46.
If there were, you could look at the totality of all
So-
conditions included in permit.
There are conditions for, I think what you might want to do is refer to the most recent CPG or something that they've issued for a large wind facility, because there are lots of CPGs for wind facilities that have no sound conditions. They're all the net metering ones, things like that. So
Right.
And this process is gonna change that.
Right, so I think when I say that any CPG, I mean sort of, maybe it should be all CPGs, and there are only 4, correct? Like, is that correct for large scale wind?
I don't know how many there are.
I mean, the idea would be to survey them, look at and say, we will never do anything louder than this or whatever.
Do you think,
I'm just trying to find
Yeah.
any
I'm
floor
just
by
wondering if
looking
we
at what
need
you
a
already issued.
secondary witness at this point to help answer the question of if that's achievable, if that looks like
I mean,
someone from the board.
in terms of what appropriate language would be.
Either that or just making sure this is clear. So, is the board,
Is there an appetite within the committee here to do a lower floor? I'm respecting the senator's view on New Hampshire as a lower floor. Representative doesn't want to go that floor. Is there any appetite to have a floor lower than what currently exists?
for emergency rulemaking?
No.
I would like to chat with the committee in another room. I think it just would be helpful, so I'm not, we're also swamped, I don't wanna be saying
How many-
yes, no, this is like, I feel like the Monty Python, what's your favorite color?
I think that's what
Red,
got us
no
here.
blue, and then he
I think
blows
that's
up.
what got us here was the yes/no problem.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, well,
When you give us 5 minutes, we're gonna go take a breather and just chat amongst ourselves so that we can continue being productive. Maybe if someone can get someone from the board here in the meantime.
We will do that.
That way
Can you try
got
for
someone
3
else
minutes and
in
we will work with our colleagues?
We're not gonna take 3 minutes to have a discussion like this. We're gonna go over
That would
there.
be
We'll
helpful.
be right